at the bottom of Kuf Lamed Hey Amid Beis. Sorry, 5 lines from the bottom. Tanya Rab Shimon ben Gamliel Leimer. Today's Gemara, Be'ikir, is going to be speaking about the halacha of a nafel, a child that's born, and you have to determine that he's not a nafel, that it's a viable child. A nafel is a non-viable baby that is going to pass away because he was born in the 8th month. As we said, in those times, a baby born in the 8th month couldn't survive. So the Gemara here talks about at what point could we determine that the baby is viable. Tanya, so we learned in the Braisa. Rab Shimon ben Gamliel Leimer, Kol sheshah lamed yoim ba'adam, a baby that lives to 30 days, to the end of 30 days that is, ain't a nafel. So we can determine now that he's not a nafel anymore. He's a viable baby. Shenemar, upeduyav mi ben chaydesh tifta. When it comes to the mitzvah of pidyon haben, so the Torah says you wait until 30 days, till the end of 30 days, to make the pidyon haben, because that's the point that you know that he has to be redeemed, because he's a viable child. Now, benegeh to an animal, there's also a similar halacha. Shmoynes yamim bebeheme, a beheme that lived to 8 days. Now, regarding a beheme, it doesn't mean to the end of 8 days. It means to the beginning of 8 days, as you see from the continuation of the Gemara. Taisus points it out over here. So, if he lived to the beginning of 8 days, then ain't a nafel. The beheme is not a nafel. Shenemar, as it says by a beheme, umiyoyim hashmini v'hala yiratza lekarbon v'gomer. From 8 days, from the beginning of the 8th day, you can bring the animal as a carbon. Okay, so this is both benegeh to a human being and benegeh to an animal. You have to determine that it's not a nafel. Zok the Gemara, ha loisha. So from this we understand that if you did not wait that period of time, sveikava, it's still a suffix whether the baby is viable or not. If so, the question is, Mimol heichem alinon, how can we make a bris milah for a baby on Shabbos if the 8th day falls out on Shabbos? It's a suffix. You don't know if this baby will end up surviving. So if he doesn't, so it ends up that you made a chabura on Shabbos without doing the mitzvah. It's not l'shem mitzvah. If so, how could you make a bris on Shabbos if you didn't yet determine that it's not a nafel? Amar Ravada Barave, so Ravada Barave answers, you can make the bris on Shabbos because either way it's not an issue. If it's a viable baby, if he was born in the 7th month or the 9th month and he's going to live, so then Shapa Kamal, so then the bris is okay, you're doing the mitzvah. Vim Lav, if it's a baby that will not survive, so then we consider him like he's not alive anymore. Even now, he's temporarily, he's living, he's breathing, but it's like he's not alive. He's not a viable baby. It's like you're cutting flesh, you're cutting meat that's not alive, and therefore it's the halacha of chabura, making a chabura only refers to a living being, not to a baby that's not viable. It's like the baby is b'chlal not alive. And therefore, miman of shach, you're not doing any melacha on Shabbos. No, so the Gemara now has this new concept here that if it's a case where there's a suffix, so memanavshach the bris is okay. So now the Gemara brings back a braisa that we learned yesterday. The Tanya, if that's the case, so the braisa that we learned that said suffix ben zayin, suffix ben ches, a baby where you have a suffix if it was born in the 7th month or born in the 8th month, ein machal no of Shabbos. You can't be machal Shabbos because it's a suffix if the bris is a mitzvah or not. If so, the question is, Amai, what's the problem? Let's make the bris, and you're not doing a malach on Shabbos. If the baby is from the 7th month or the 9th month and he's going to stay alive, he's a viable baby, shapikamo, so then it's a mitzvah of bris. Then lav, and if it's a baby born in the 8th month, so then machatach babasaru. You're cutting basa, it's like cutting meat, then the baby is not considered to be alive. The Gemara already before in the Braisa said this expression that a baby that's still living, but it's born in the 8th month and it's not going to survive. It's like an evan. It's mamish like a stone. So based on that, the Gemara is saying at the same point, he's not alive anymore. So what should be the problem to make the bris for a baby where you have a suffix? Essentially, every baby until 30 days is a suffix. So my nafkamina in a case where you actually have a suffix, it's always a suffix. And for the Gemara, Mama berei de Ravine, Anov Rav Nechumi bar Zachariah, myself and Rav Nechumi bar Zachariah, Targimna, we teach that braise, Mimol Hachanami Malinale. That bris did not mean to say that you can't make a bris for a baby that's alive and you're not sure if it's viable, you're not sure if it's from the 7th month or the 8th month. No, that's not what that bris was saying. That bris was saying that for such a baby, the preparations for the bris, that can't be done. Following the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, that for a regular bris on Shabbos, you could do the preparations for a bris. A baby that's a suffix, if it's Zayin, a suffix Ches, for that baby you can't make the preparations for the bris, because the preparations, what are the preparations? You're making a fire, you're making the knife for the bris. Those preparations, you don't know if it's a malacha or not. The actual bris itself, if the baby is not viable, so it's mechatach basa ba'alma, you're just cutting meat, that's not a chabura b'chlal. But when you get to the preparations, that's where the Braisa says that it's mechatach basa ba'alma. Omar Abaye, so now Abaye said regarding this statement of Rav Ada bar Ava, kitanoi, this that Rav Ada bar Ava said, that when you have a nefel, and you're not sure if the baby is viable or not. So if you're going to say that he's not viable, then it's mamish like a mace. The baby's like not alive, and it's like you're cutting basar ba'alma. This seems to be a machlekes tanoim, because it says as follows. The pasuk says regarding the tumah of nevela, v'chiyamas min abeheme ashehi lochem la'achla, a beheme that dies, and this is a beheme that you can eat. So it says la'achla, that you could eat it. So what do you see from here? Lahavi ben shmeina she'ein shchitase mitarasei. So the Tanakama says the word la'achla teaches me that if it's a behemoth that's born to 8 months, so the shchita will not be mitar the behemoth. So what you see here is from the Tanakama, just like by a human being, if the pregnancy was full term, 9 months, so then the baby will survive. The same thing is also with a behemoth. A behemoth that's not born, fully developed, will not survive. So therefore, because the behemoth will not survive, so it's not la'achla, you can't eat it, it's like it's dead. And if you shecht it, the shechita will not take away the status of the behemoth, which is that it's a nevela. So the shechita is not metar the behemoth. Even a behemoth that's born and it's a nefel, it can't survive. It was born in the 8th month, but if you shecht it, it will be metar the behemoth. There won't be any tumas nevela. The shchita is a good shchita. So what's the basis of their argument? My lav b'hakim ifligi. It seems like the argument is the point that Rav Ada bar Ava said. The Ma'asavar Chayu, the second opinion in the Braisa, Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon, so they consider a baby born in the 8th month, although it's not a baby that's viable, it's not going to live, but yet right now it's living. If you make a shchita, the shchita is not stam like you're cutting a dead animal. Right now it's alive, you make a shchita, and the shchita is good, and it won't be an avela. That's what they hold. Omar Sava, the Tanakama holds, like what Rav Ada bar Ava said before, that if it's a nefel, so then mesu. It's like it's not alive. So if you're making a shchita, the shchita doesn't accomplish anything, because the behemoth is not going to live. It's already an avela. So it seems like what he said is a machlekes tanoim. Omar Rave, so Rave explains, no. If this is the pshat of their argument, they're arguing regarding the status of this behemoth, if you're going to shecht it, whether it's going to be an avela, and an avela makes you tome, or not, or it will be a shchuta, and it won't be tome. Let them argue regarding the kashrus, whether you're allowed to eat it or not. Is the shchita a good shchita to be allowed to eat it? Why they're only arguing in the pshat of this pasuk regarding tum and tara? So Ella, rather, the pshat in this machlekes is different. The kula alma meisu. Everybody agrees to what Rav Ada bar Ava said before, a nefel is a mace. For Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon Savri, still they hold that if you shecht it, it won't be an avela, legabe tumah. Specifically the Gabi Tumah. Why? Ketreifa. Because they hold you compare it to a treifa. The halacha of a treifa is an animal that cannot live more than 12 months, or cannot survive for 12 months. That's the concept of a treifa. If you shecht a treifa, so that's what we know as treif, that it's not kosher to eat, because it can't live for 12 months. But the halacha when you shecht a treifa is, it won't be an avela legabi tumah, because it didn't die without shchita, it died through shchita, legabe tumah, it will not be an avela. So now the question is, what's the status of this nefel? We know that it's not going to survive. So it's similar to a treifa. So Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda, and Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon say we compare this nafel to a treifa. Treifa isn't the fact by a treifa. Lav, isn't it true? Af agav the meisahi, although it's going to die within 12 months. Shchitasa mitarasa. Nevertheless, the shchita will not make it kosher, but the shchita has the effect that it will not be an avela, it will be tahir, hachanami. The same is also with a nafel, loishna. You shech the behemoth, which is a nafel, it's not going to survive, but yet it makes it ois nevela. It will not be tummy. That's what they hold. The Rabbanon argue on this, and they say, loy dami letreifa. This nafel that's going to die, you can't compare to the status of a treifa. Why not? Treifa hoisala shasa kosher. Treifa is an animal that's born, it's born healthy, and it could live, and then something happened. Something happened, and one of the limbs, one of the organs of the animal got affected, and it's not going to live 12 months. So therefore, over there, if you shecht it, it won't be considered to be an avela. This animal that's born as a nafel, it's born without full term pregnancy, and therefore it can't live. It's born in a way that it never could have survived. So therefore, from the moment that it's born, it's just living temporarily. It's not a live animal. So therefore, it's an avela. Even if you shecht it, it won't help. So the Gemara now questions this reasoning of the Rabbanon. You find a similar thing regarding treifa as well. Treifa mi beten, a behemoth that's born from right away, from the moment that it's born, there's something there that's a treifa. That's something in the organs of the animal that's not born fully healthy, and therefore it can't survive. What can we say in such a case? Over there, the shechita still helps with such a kind of treifa. So why shouldn't it help for a nafel as well? So, and for the Gemara, hasam yesh b'mina shechita. This is an animal that's born full term. An animal that's born full term is a kind of animal that usually could survive. So therefore the shechita helps for it. Hacha, an animal that's not born full term and can't survive, it's a nafel, ein b'mina shechita. This is an animal that this kind of animal could never survive, and therefore the shechita will not help it. So the conclusion of the Gemara is that the machlokes here in this bris is regarding tumah specifically, and it's a machlokes whether shechita is effective for a nafel or not, whether you compare it to a treifa or not. But regarding achila, to shech the behemoth, which is a nafel, to be allowed to eat it, everybody would agree that you can't eat this because it's like you're shechting an animal which is already dead. It's an animal which can't survive at all, like what Rav Ada bar Ava said. Now the Shaila was asked. This whole thing is based on the opinion of Rab Shimon ben Gamliel. Shimon ben Gamliel says you have to wait 30 days by a human being, you have to wait by an animal 8 days to determine that the baby is not a nafel. So the question is, mi pligi Rabbanon aleh de Rab Shimon ben Gamliel. Do the Rabbanon argue on Rab Shimon ben Gamliel? We brought a bris at Rab Shimon ben Gamliel Omer. Is there a reisha of that bris? Is there a Rabbanon that argue on him? And if yes, if there is a Rabbana that argue in Rab Shimon ben Gamliel, halacha kamaisai, or yen halacha kamaisai? Do we paskin like Rab Shimon ben Gamliel, or do we paskin like the Rabbanon that an animal, the main thing the Gemara will be discussing right now, is an animal born, and it's not yet, didn't come to 8 days, do we have to wait to determine that the animal is not a nafel? Tashama, so the Gemara brings up Mishnah, so it says, Egel sheneilad b'yomtiv, a calf that's born on yomtiv. So there would be an issue of muktzah. Muktzah, it's neilad, it's born on yomtiv, so there should be an issue of muktzah. But it says no, there's no issue of muktzah. Sheichten oisa b'yomtiv. You could shecht it on yomtiv. Why is there no muktzah? The answer is because the fetus is there in the mother's womb before it's born, and therefore it's considered to be prepared. It's available. It's there on yomtiv. What happens if you would shecht the mother itself on yomtiv, and you have the baby inside? You can use the baby. You can eat from the meat from the baby. So therefore, it's considered to be prepared from before yomtiv. It's not muktzah. But the issue is, how could we say sheichten oisa b'yomtiv if the calf is born on yomtiv? It's the first day that it was born. You didn't determine yet that it's not a nafel. According to Rab Shimon ben Gamliel, you have to wait until the beginning of the 8th day. So we see here clearly that there's another opinion of the Rabbanon that say that it's viable and you could rely on it even on the first day. So before I go weiter, let me just explain. Rashi says the basis of the opinion of the Rabbanon that you don't have to wait 7 days by an animal to determine that it's not a nafel, you don't know. You don't see the behemoth survived yet. Why shouldn't you have to wait? The answer is that Rabbanon have two things to rely on. First of all, a chazakah. There's a chazakah that most animals that are born, the animal was born after full-term pregnancy. That's the chazakah. Rashi says, chazakah kalu lechadashav. And then Rashi says there's also a raiv. Raiv hayeldas einan mapilais. Raiv mothers or animals that give birth are not mapil. The babies that are born are viable. So therefore, we can rely on a chazakah, we can rely on a raiv, and we don't have to wait the 30 days by a human being or the 7 days, 8 days by an animal to determine that it's not a nafel. That would be the basis of the Rabbanan's opinion. So we see that over here in this case where you could shech the egel on the day it's born. You don't have to wait. And for the Gemara, it's not a raya because hacha b'maya skinon the kimle begavei shekol lechadoshav. That could be a case where the person that sees this egel born knows for a fact, he knows exactly when it was conceived and how long the pregnancy was. He knows for a fact that it was full-term pregnancy of 9 months. And therefore, even in this case, even Rab Shimon Gamliel would agree that you don't have to wait 8 months. You don't have to wait 8 days, that is. Tashama, another raya is Vishavin, they both agree. So this is in a case where there's a machlekes between Rabbi Yehuda and Rab Shimon. What this is talking about is the halacha of a b'chayr. What's the halacha of a b'chayr? A b'chayr that's born, if it doesn't have a mum, if there's no blemish in the animal, so then it goes to the kayin, and the kayin has to bring it as a carbon. So what do? You can't bring it as a carbon, so you have to wait until it has a mum. Then once it has a mum, you give it to the kayin, but the kayin doesn't have to bring it as a carbon. The kayin eats it for himself. So you have to inspect the animal to see that it doesn't have a mum. So according to Rab Shimon, I think it is, he says that on Yontif, you can't inspect the animal of a mum. Even if you already saw that it has a mum, you have to bring it to an expert to inspect it. You're not allowed to inspect it on Yontif. Why not? Because it's considered as if you're being misakin. You're preparing, you're making it, you're fixing. You're taking an animal that could not be eaten by the kayin and you're inspecting it, and when you identify the mum, now it becomes roy to be eaten. Now the kayin could shecht it for himself. So therefore you're not allowed to do that on Yom Tif. So then it continues, the bris there continues, but v'shavin, everybody agrees, she'im nailad hu umumay imay. If you see a baby, an animal born, and as it's born, you see right away from the birth that it has a mum with it, as Rashi says, that you had a dayan, you had an expert that sat there, he was there by the birth, and he saw as it's born, that it was born right away with a mum, shazem and amuchan. So this is an animal that was prepared from the moment of birth to be eaten. You're not fixing, you're not determining anything new, it had that status right from the beginning, and therefore you could shecht it right away on Yontif. So the question is, again, you see here that you could shecht an animal even before you come to the 7 days that you determine that it's not a nafel, not like what Rab Shimon Gamliel says. And for the Gemara, hachanami in this case as well, shekol lechadashav. We're talking about a case where a person knows for a fact that it was a full-term pregnancy, and even Rab Shimon Gamliel would agree that it's not a nafel. Tashema, another ayah, Dam Rav Yudah Mashmuel, halachik, Rab Shimon Gamliel. Rav Yudah Mashmuel said that we paskin like Rab Shimon Gamliel. So the Gemara says halacha. If he says that we paskin like Rab Shimon Gamliel, meklal pligi. So we see that there's an argument. We have this many times in the Gemara. If you say that there's halacha like one individual, like one tana, it's a raya that there's another opinion that argues. So we know that the Rabbanon argue on Rab Shimon Gamliel, shma mina. This is a conclusive raya that there's a machlokes between the Rabbanon and Rab Shimon Gamliel.
Then the halacha would be like Rabbanon, no? Yeah.
So we'll see in the Hamshach of the Gemara that the Gemara here says that the halacha is like Rab Shimon Gamliel, it's only l'chumra. Really, the halacha should be like the Rabbanon because they are the majority opinion. We'll see soon in the Hamshach of the Gemara. Omer Abaye, now Abaye will come and explain this machlokes. So we have a machlokes here. Do you have to wait to determine that it's not a nafel? That's what Rab Shimon Gamliel says. The Rabbanan say, no, you don't have to wait. You can rely on a roiv and a chazakah right away that the child is a viable child. So Amar Abaye, nafal min agag. If Rachmana litzlan, a baby born and then falls off a roof, or achle ari, or a lion ate up the baby. So this is something that by an external cause there was a death. Divrei HaKoil, everybody would agree, chayhu, that I could rely on the roiv, I could rely on the chazakah, that this baby was not a nafel, the baby was a living baby, a viable baby. Ki pligi, when would be the argument of the Rabbanon and Rab Shimon Gamliel? Shepiek umeis, when you don't see any external cause of why the baby died. The baby yawned and died. The baby was very weak from the beginning, and it just yawned and died. Then there's the argument. Mar Sovar.
Doesn't it get to what?
We'll see soon, the Gemara will say. Mar Sovar Chayhu. So the Rabbanon say, I could still rely on a roiv and a chazaka. A roiv and a chazaka is a very powerful thing. I rely on that and I say that this baby was a viable baby. Even though I don't see any cause of death. It seems like it died because it was never viable, but it doesn't matter. I say that we don't know the cause of the death, and mistam I say that the baby was a living baby. Umar Savar, Rab Shimon Gamliel says, Meisu. In such a case, when you don't see any cause for its death, I say that from the moment it was born, it couldn't survive. And that's why it died. So the Gemara asks the question, Lamai nafkimina, to determine the status of a baby that died soon after it was born, what is this relevant for? And for the Gemara, liftoy min yibum. It's relevant legabe yibum. Right? The halacha of yibum is if a person dies and he leaves his wife without any children, so then the brother of the husband has to marry her. That's what yibum is. Unless there's a baby here. So if you have to determine whether this baby was a viable baby. If the baby that was born is viable, so then there's no din of yibum. She can go get married to whoever she wants. If the baby was not viable, so then there's a halacha of yibum. So that's what this is relevant for. Benegeh to a human being. Benegeh to an animal, the Gemara does not explain. What would be the nafkemina? Because according to what the Gemara is saying now, l'chayra, there would be no nafkemina benegeh to an animal. An animal that just yawned and died. So either way, so the animal's dead now. The animal is a nevela. There was no shechita done. If there was a shechita done, so then that's a death by an external cause. That would be a death similar to an animal that fell off a roof or an animal that was attacked by a lion that ate it. So and in that case, the Gemara said that there's no argument. Everybody agrees that a death by an external cause, I assume that chayhu, that it was a living being. So there's no clear hesber in the Gemara here. What would be the nafkemina benegeh to an animal? But now the Gemara is going to switch this. The Gemara is going to, at least according to another opinion. This was a baya. Now the Gemara says, nafal min agag. You're telling me that if the animal or a human being fell off a roof, or was attacked by a lion, because there was an external cause of death, I assume that the baby was a living baby. Is this the case? But for Rav Papa v'Rav Huna berei Rav Yeshua iklu lebei berei Rav Yidi. These two Ameroim, Rav Papa and Rav Huna berei Rav Yeshua, came to visit the son of Rav Yidi Baravan. V'avid luhu, he prepared for them igla tilsa, a calf born third to its mother. We had this expression before in the Gemara. That's considered to be the best calf that's born third to its mother. But it was only 7 days old. And Rav Papa and Rav Huna berei Rav Yeshua said to him, if you would have patience and would wait just until the night to enter into the 8th day of the life of this animal, we would have eaten from it. But now that you shechted the animal before the 8th day, we're not going to be able to eat from this animal because it wasn't determined yet if the animal was a neifel or not. It could be what you shechted was a neifel. So therefore we can't eat from it. So what do you see from here? What are we talking about? We're talking about shchita. The animal didn't die on its own. There was an external cause of death. The person shechted the animal. And still, what did they say? We're going to be chayshish for the opinion of Rab Shimon ben Gamliel that it's a neifel. So we see that Rab Shimon ben Gamliel considers it to be a neifel even if there's an external cause of death. Like what we said before, if it fell off a roof or if a lion ate it. So therefore the Gemara, according to their opinion, changes this. Dr. Gemara, ki pligi... Elo, skipped a line. Elo, the pshat of here is keshapiyek umeis, an animal that yawned and died. In other words, you don't see any particular cause of death. Divrei akol meiso. Everybody would agree that this is an animal that was never viable and it's dead. Ki pligi,
Talking about the child.
Yeah.
The child.
Yeah. Ki pligi benafal min agag or va'achlei ari. The argument was in the case where you have an external cause of death. Then there's the machlokes. What do you say then? Mar Sovar Meisu. Rab Shimon Gamliel says, since 7 days did not pass, I still say that the animal was a mace. You never determined that it's alive, that therefore we consider it to be chayshish, that it's not viable. Mar Sovar Chayu. And the Rabbanan say, no, I could rely on the chazakah. I could rely on Roiv, that the behemah is a live animal. That's when the argument is. So Adarabba, the machlokes is when there's an external cause of death. Over here, the shaila is, should I rely on a chazakah or not? Or should I be chayshish that maybe this animal was not viable?
Why not rely on chazakah and Roiv? We always have that.
It's a good question. So it's a very good question. So some achronim say that this is an exception, and the reason why it's an exception is because it says in the pasuk, "Upeduyav mi ben chaydish tifteh." Shmeinas Yamim, by the Be'em, it says Umiyayim Hashmini. So we have Feidish Psukim in the Torah regarding Pidyon Aben and regarding a carbon, that the Torah is saying, wait this period of time. So here the Torah is telling you a Chiddush, although usually you can rely on a Chazakah and Roiv, here it's telling you not to rely on the usual Chazakah and Roiv. Zakta Gemara, Berei, the Ravdimi Bar Yosef, the son of Ravdimi Bar Yosef. Is Yalad Le'ahu Yenuka, he had a baby, and Begoit Klasin Yomin Shachav. Within 30 days the baby died. Yosef kamis abel ilavei. So he was sitting shiva. He was doing avelus for this baby that died. Amalei avua. So his father, which was Ravdimi bar Yosef, said to him, "Tzavronisa kabayis lamechel. You're sitting shiva because you want to eat the traditional foods that they eat by the avelus. You want to have this food. That's why you're sitting shiva." In other words, he was telling him that you don't have to sit shiva because the baby who died as a neiful, it was never viable, and we're chayshish for what Rav Shimon Gamliel said, that the baby is not alive. Amalei, so he answered his father, Kim li bei, I know for a fact, shekalu loy chadashav, that the baby was a living baby, the full-term pregnancy, and therefore it's something that he does have to have avelus for. Similar story, Rav Ashi Ikla bei Rav Kahana. Rav Ashi came to Rav Kahana, Isra bei Milsa begoit losen yomen. He had this tragedy that a baby passed away within 30 days. Chazye, so Rav Ashi saw the Yosef komisabel lave. He was sitting shiva for this baby. Amalei, Rav Ashi said to him, Leisavele mar laha da Omer Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Do you not hold of this that was said in the name of Shmuel, that halacha ke Rab Shimon ben Gamliel? We paskin like Rab Shimon ben Gamliel, that a baby born and passed away within 30 days, we're chayshish that it's not viable, and therefore you don't have to be misabel, you don't have to sit shiva. Amalei, so he responded, Kimli begavei, I know for a fact, shekala lechadashav, that this was a full-term pregnancy, it was a viable baby, and therefore he's sitting shiva.
So according to his opinion, if it's a full-term pregnancy, even if the baby didn't survive 30 days, you can sit shiva.
Correct. You could determine that, yeah. Itmar, now the Gemara brings another machlokes based on this subject. So we learned the following machlokes. Meis betoich shloishim. So you have a baby that passed away within 30 days. Now v'omda v'niskatsha. The mother went along and got married to somebody else. So now, as we said before, the halacha of yibum, this is a very big problem here, right? Because if the husband had passed away, we're talking about a case where the husband had passed away before, and now she has a baby, and the baby that she had passed away within the month. Now the question is, the baby that she had, is it a viable baby or not? If it's a viable baby, so then she can go get married to whoever she wants. There's no yibum if she has a baby. If the baby was not viable, so then she can't get married to whoever she wants. There's yibum. She has to get married to the brother of the husband. But she, Or chalitza, correct. She didn't wait. She went and she figured that she has a baby, and it passed away, but she had a baby, and she went and got married. So what do we do now? So Ravina says in the name of Rave, if she got married, if her new husband that she got married to is a Yisrael, so then chayletzes, she'll have to accept a chalitza from the brother of her husband that died. Once she accepts a chalitza, then she'll be able to continue living, she'll be able to get married to this person, this husband that she's married to now. However, if she got married to a kayin, what's the halacha of a kayin? By a kayin, you can't get married to a chalutza. Midrabanan though, only midrabanan. Minatayra, a kayin can't get married to a grusha. But midrabanan, you can't get married to a chalutza either. So if she's going to accept a chalitza from the brother of the husband that died, so now she won't be able to live with a new husband. We want to allow her to be able to live with the new husband that she married. So therefore, ein chaletzes. She doesn't need the chalitza, and we rely on the fact that the baby that was born was a viable baby, and she doesn't need chalitza. So what do we see from this Gemara? that the whole psak din that we said before, Amar Rav Yehuda Mashmul, that we paskin like Rab Shimon ben Gamliel, that we considered the baby, were chayshish, that the baby was not viable, that was l'chumra. But really, Rabbanan is the majority opinion. In a case where she already got married to a Kayin, and we don't want her to have to leave her new husband, we rely on the opinion of the Rabbanan that the baby was viable. And therefore she could continue living with her new husband even without chalitza.
If she married a Kain, the problem is that
Maybe she has to have chalitza. Maybe she wasn't allowed to marry the Kain. Like there's a lav, like tzia eishes amesa chutza. Without chalitza, without yibum, she can't go get married to anyone else. Right? But we rely on the fact, we rely on the opinion of the Rabbanan, that we accept the chazak and the roiv, that the baby was viable, and therefore she doesn't need chalitza.
Obviously, this all the Yevet, it's not.
Yeah, obviously. But the Yevet, l'chatchila were machmer, like Rab Shimon ben Gamliel, that she would need chalitza. But with the Yevet, once she got married, and she got married to a kohen, if we're going to require chalitza at this point, so then she won't be able to continue living with her new husband, the kohen. So we rely on the opinion of the Rabbanan that she doesn't need any chalitza, the baby was viable. So this was, who said this? This was Ravina speaking in the name of Rava. Okay, Rav Shravya mishmei de Rava Amar. Rav Shravya said in the name of Rava, no, we're machmer. We paskin like Rab Shimon Gamliel, we're machmer. Achazu va'achazu chayletzes. Whether this woman got married to a Yisrael, whether she got married to a Kayin, either way, right now she has to have chalitza. We're chayshish, the baby was not viable, and therefore she's going to need chalitza. And if she's married to a Kayin, she won't be able to continue living with the Kayin. So Ravina said to Rav Shravya, you're right. At night, when Rava was learning this halacha, he said like you said, that either way you're going to need chalitza. But Letzafra, the next morning, Hodabe, Rava had charat, and he said, like I repeated in his name, that if she got married to a Kayin, you don't need chalitza. You could rely on the opinion of the Rabbanon. Amalei. So when Rav Shravya heard this, Rav Shravya said, Shayusa, he was mat to this, he said that this is allowed. Yeheirava the Tishur Tarbe. If he allowed this, so Yehiratzen that he should allow to eat chaylev, he should allow to eat forbidden fats which are not kosher. In other words, he was saying an expression, this it can't be Rava was mat to this. You must have not heard properly. Just like it can't be mat to chaylev, which is totally aser, it can't be that Rava was mat to this. We for sure paskin completely like Rab Shimon ben Gamliel, and you have to be machmer. Okay, this is the end of the sugya of the halacha of a neifel. Now we go back to what it said in the Mishnah, b'nigeya to a bris of an androgynous. Right? An androgynous that has simonim of a zachar and of an akeva. So it said in the Mishnah that you can't make the bris on Shabbos because it's a suffix if he's chayiv in a bris. You don't know if he's a zachar, you don't know if he's an akeva. So how could you make the bris on Shabbos? But Rabbi Yehuda says you make the bris on Shabbos. Let's see. Zok the Gemara Rabbi Yehuda mater v'chulu Omer Rav Shizvi Omer Rav Chista. Loi lakoil Omer Rav Yehuda androgen zacharu. The pshat in Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is not that he considers an androgen for sure to be a zachar. He's not identifying the fact that he's his gender, that he's for sure a zachar. She'im atoim mekain. If you're going to say so, then be'erchen, regarding the halacha of erchen. Erchen is when a person says, my value I will give to hektish. So in Parshas B'chol Kaisa, you have all different kinds of amounts that a person is chayiv to give based on his age. And there's a difference if it's a zachar or it's an akeva. If a male or a female says his erech, so the question is, what's the halacha b'negei to an androgynous? So im kain, again, by erchen, if an androgynous says that my value I give to hektish, so we should determine that he's a zachar. And how do we know that according to Rav Yehuda, by erchen, an androgynous is not considered to be a zachar? The Tanya, because we learned in Abraisa, hazachar v'loi tumtum. It says in the Torah zachar, that a zachar that says that my value should be given to hektish, that excludes a tumtum, and it also of androgynous. An androgynous is not a zachar. So maybe he's not a zachar, but maybe we consider him to be a female, and he has to give to hektish the value of a woman. And then it says right in the Torah, nekeva. So there's a zachar and a keva. An androgynous is not a zachar and not a nekeva. So therefore, the halacha of erchen does not apply to him. Zachar vadai and a keva vados v'loi tumtum vadregenis, and tumtum and andregenis is not a zachar and not a keva. Now this is a brisa that comes from where? It comes from Teres Kayanim or Sifra. And the Gemara continues, this is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. How do I know? Stam Sifra Rabbi Yehuda. When you have anything in Teres Kaina without a name, it's the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Just like we have Stam Mishnah Rabbi Meir, Stam Sifra is Rabbi Yehuda. So this is Rabbi Yehuda's opinion that an androgynous is not a Zachar and not a Nekeva. Amar Rav Nachman by Yitzchak. Rav Nachman by Yitzchak brings another case where you see that Rav Yehuda does not hold that an androgynous is a Zachar. Anybody is kosher to be Mekadesh. We're talking over here about the waters of the Para Aduma that has to be placed into a vessel with the ashes of the Para Aduma. Anybody would be kosher to do this. Chutz mechera sheite v'katan. Excluding a chera sheite v'katan, the Gemara darshans this, Gemara learns out psukim for this. Rabbi Yehuda machshir b'katan. Rabbi Yehuda says a cotton could prepare this water for the Para Aduma, but upaisel be'isha ve'androgenes. He passes on isha and androgenes because there's a pasuk where it clearly says v'nosan ma'im chaim el keli, v'nosan is lashon zachar. A zachar has to do this, but not an isha and not an androgenes. So we see that an androgenes is not a zachar. So Shema Mina, we see that Rabbi Yehuda does not consider an androgenes to be a zachar. That's not the reason why he's chayiv in a bris. So why does Rabbi Yehuda say when you get to Mila that although he's not a Zachar for sure, he's still Chayiv in a Mila? Mishum Dichsev, Himoy Lachem Kol Zachar. The Torah says the word Kol Zachar, so that's a riboy that adds and says that even an androgynous is Chayiv in a bris. Although we can't determine him for sure to be a Zachar, nevertheless the Torah writes Kol that he's Chayiv in a bris. So this Chiddush of Rabbi Yehuda was specifically benegayet to bris, not benegayet to anything else. There's a big arichas in Rishayim and Achrayim. If you see here massive taisus and benegayet together of androgynous, and it's a few different places in Shas. What exactly is an androgynous?
Oh, that's what it's talking about.
Is an androgynous a combination of Zachar and a Keva? He's part Zachar, part Nekeva, he's both. Is an androgynous a person that's neither? He's not a Zachar, not a Nekeva. He's a min for himself, or he's stam a suffix, we don't know what he is. Either way, Rabbi Yehuda holds he's not a Zachar. B'negeya to a bris, where he has the aver of a Zachar, and therefore the Torah is machadish, kol Zachar, that you chayiv to make the bris.
Sure.